But let's talk about on the other side because we kind of said, oh, this is the low end of six. The high end of six is that loyalty, that courage, and the spiritual value of faith.
This season on the Living Out Love podcast, we are focusing on you, who you are, what motivates you, what you're here to contribute, and how you can expand. We'll be utilizing my leadership skills and spiritual connection, diving deep into the Enneagram and astrology. Listen every week to become intimately aware of yourself. Only then can you heal and grow. Let's get to work, loves. Hello, loves. Welcome to our Enneagram series. I'm joined by my fabulous parents, Dana and Stephanie Foy. They are integrative Enneagram certified practitioners. And we are talking about the sixes today, which my mom's a 3, my dad's a 9. So they both have a stretch of release to the 6. So this ought to be juicy. So somebody tell us who's a 6? Give me the general kind of archetype of what a 6 is.
Okay, yeah, so a famous movie star who is a 6 is Tom
What? One
Hanks.
second. Can you at
You can
least
imagine
title
Tom
the
Hanks.
6? Like the
Okay,
5 was the quiet specialist. What's the 6?
Six is loyal skeptic.
Loyal skeptic. Okay, now talk about Tom Hanks so I can have that in my mind.
okay. So sixes are very family oriented. They're very protective type people. They're looking for what's the next shoe to drop. How can I protect people? So it's very highly viewed that Tom Hanks as an actor is a type 6. He works very, very hard at perfecting his craft. And he has an energy of him. I've seen him in interviews and in movie as someone that's a protective, a family guy, trying to look after people. And he plays that role very well in Private Ryan. That was kind of a 6 role. He was the captain, if you've seen Private Ryan, doing the right thing, going out to find Private Ryan, looking over his squad the best he possibly could, problem solving all through the battles. Well, who needs to be here? Who needs to be there? That is 6 energy. Uh, for those that are basketball fans, Kevin Durant, a very successful, talented basketball player, played for several teams. He was the 6. Very similar to Tom Hanks in that he's very team oriented. He did whatever the team needed to win. If he needed to be quiet, he was quiet. If he needed to have a leading role and take over the game, he had the talent and the energy, to be aggressive. If he didn't need to be aggressive, he could read the other team and he could just pass the ball. Always looking forward to find out what the other team was presenting as a challenge and how he personally and he as a team could be ahead of that and overcome that. So that is an athlete. Now, for the Harry Potter fans, Severus Snape is a 6. The sixes are kind of standoffish, kind of quiet. You never really know what they're thinking, but they are observing and they're measuring what's going on here. How do I need to keep everybody protected? Now, Severus, during the whole movie, you never knew he was protecting Harry Potter, but the whole time he was. And he was so good at it, he knew he had to hide it. So he did whatever he had to do to protect Harry, and play both sides of the coin to get it done. So that's kind of a quick snapshot of people or actors you might know who can view as
It's interesting
sixes.
because when you started with Tom Hanks, I had the feeling of warmth, and when you think protective, I kind of think warmth, but I wouldn't put Severus Snape in that category. So is warmth something we would or would not associate with a 6?
Well, I am familiar with 3 6s in my life, and all three of them have a little
Okay.
bit different energy. So, everybody has their subtypes. They demonstrate behaviors of other numbers. So I think this warmth is, I equate that with part of their protecting people, making them feel safe, looking after them. If I can keep people calm and comfortable under my leadership and guys, things are going to go well. So I see that as a 6 behavior.
So one of the hallmarks of six is trustworthiness. So you might think about that you may feel a natural warmth towards people that you feel trustworthy. They guard your trust and they earn your trust. And
Yeah,
so,
that makes sense. It is funny though, because with Tom Hanks, that's one of the warmest people that we know, but Severus Snape is one of the least warm people, but he was undercover, so but it's just interesting. However, probably since Dumbledore knew his alliance, perhaps Dumbledore experienced a greater warmth towards him than everybody else
Right.
in
But
that
he
category.
was, I mean, if you think about the title, loyal skeptic,
Mm-hmm.
he was playing loyalty on both sides. He was truly loyal to Dumbledore and to Potter, but he was also walking the line about loyalty to Voldemort. He was
Mm-hmm.
doing that whole exhibit of that sort of thing. So I was like, okay, that makes sense to me. Like,
Yeah. It's interesting because when I first read about sixes, I was like, oh, all right, like that's interesting, cool, loyal skeptic. And then I realized that one of my very best friends is a six, and I was like, oh, yeah, this is why she's awesome. Like that loyalty has been so foundational to my ability to get through hard things. Like she's the person that I know I can call if I need support.
yeah.
So yeah. Okay, so they're loyal. One of the other things that you said, they can be kind of standoffish, like they're always observing. Um, what are any other markers of a six? What are they solving for?
Well,
Or
let's
like
first of all say that sixes live in the thinking triad. So the thinking triad, 5, 6, and 7, and they're in the middle of that thinking triad. So that means
thinking
they're,
repressed?
huh?
Thinking repressed?
No, well, no, some of them could be if there's countertype, but they're
Okay.
typically that's their strong suit is where they're going to be thinking with, and then they're going to be acting because they're acting in a way to defend, protect, um, because they're always looking for, like Dad said, the other shoe to fall, the other,
Mm-hmm.
they're very risk aware people. So they think and act, but so that means their feelings are tend to be uh, less, less dominant, but they tend to, from a feeling perspective, they tend to not have, um, they don't tend to hang on to their positive emotions very long. They are
Mm,
more comfortable in um, doubt and unease. Fear is their driving factor. We
mm,
fear is six, and so but on the opposite of that, the high side of six is that they can use that six to move into courage. And they'll typically do that when it's in defense of the greater good, and despite their own sometimes personal apprehension. In fact, there's one type six, the counter type six, that embraces fear. It's like they get that adrenaline rush of taking the risk, so
mm.
they sort of like feel the fear and do it anyway, sort of people. But so that's something to kind of think about. But that's sort of what's underneath for a lot of them. The world's not a safe place, and I've got to protect myself and those I care about.
Mm. Like a police officer?
Yeah. So lots of people in law enforcement,
Would it
sixes tend to.
I mean, I don't want to go political, but I'm going, if I was a six, I think I'd be more prone to fall into conspiracy theory because that often speaks my language of fear and the world's a dangerous place.
So if you want to go politics, so our current president, Joe Biden, is reportedly a six.
Mm,
And he came in, think about the conditions under which he came in. We had just come through Donald Trump, who reportedly is a type 8, which we'll get to. Type 8, active controller, large and in charge, my way, the highway. And we had just come through this huge shift. There was all this unease, whatever, upset in the culture.
Yeah.
And sixes, because of how they think and because of that anticipation of problems and all that, they're seen as stabilizers. They're seen as they bring stability. They can bring calm. So it's not surprising that Joe Biden would have been a good person to be presented in that time of COVID in response to what had been a presidency by Donald Trump. So that was an appropriate position for him at the time. Now, what I think is interesting is we can talk about this when we get to wings. What's important for a person to be elected is that they have to have a vision. So they've got to be able to demonstrate their seven.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that when we get to wings. But
Yeah.
yes, so
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting for me with like the psychology of where our emotions take us,
yes.
So what else, like, so if they're observers, I guess what they're always observing is what might go wrong and therefore how to keep people safe, or what else are they like looking for? Like I'm always solving for who's going to love me and how can I make them love me more. Like that's what I'm looking
Right.
for. That's not what a 6 is looking for.
So their focus of attention, what can go wrong, and they construct the worst case scenarios. They're on the lookout for threats. They pay attention to hidden intentions and dynamics in relationships. So not only are they looking for what problems exist in the world or, in systems but also in relationships. So they're constant always testing relationships because they're waiting to see, is this really, can I really count on this? Are you really who you say you are? What are those dynamics?
And I think at one point in time, I think you had told me that it was thought that there were more 6s than any other number. Am I recalling that correctly?
I think that's accurate. I don't know. Dana, do you remember?
Okay.
I don't.
Okay.
But it does sort of make sense given that their core emotion is fear. And there's so much in the world.
They're not as relatively. I don't spot them as easily as I do 3 7s and 9s and 1s. They, you know what I mean. They're not as demonstrative on the surface. Something you have to kind of come get to know them. So that they feel most vulnerable when they're not prepared. There's a lot of thought and planning going on that they're ready to meet the day, and they draw upon wisdom, experience, and so they're type of person. So the way they get what they want is by being compliant. They strive to get what they want by focusing on safety and getting along with the group. They do their best to go along until they feel uncomfortable, and then I think something's awry, they will step up. And when things don't go right, they're reactive. They respond by reacting defensively and at times overreacting or blaming others. So you can kind of see that in someone who, like they would get under stress at some point, and they would have to take some type of action, verbal or something to try to fix things.
Well, I think the get along to go along makes sense with their nature to be loyal.
Right. But they have a unique relationship with authority because while they want to be loyal, the skeptic kicks in. And so they're always looking at, okay, so they may test people in leadership in a way that's different because they know their loyalties on the line. So they're gonna, and it's interesting that two women I'm thinking of from the class that are sixes, you could see where that showed up in both their professional lives.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah, more about that is they can be kind of conflicted. They want to go along and get along, but until somebody proves they're trustworthy to know what they're doing, it's hard for them to really bond and feel themselves comfortable in the group till they feel like everything is safe. So that energy can be transposed to somebody else, and they feel a little anxious around the six because the six may not be totally settled in there. And I know a couple of them that are like that. It takes me a while to warm up to them because they're still sorting themselves out, and it's just something that they do. I don't think they are aware that they're doing that.
The other thing, because of who they are and because of what they're scanning for in the world, is that they're always going to be bringing up what are the obstacles? What are the things that are going to get in the way? What are what are the things that can go wrong? So people that are trying to make change efforts, people that are trying to get things done, they might see those people as resistant, and in their more extreme versions as rebellious. And so it's kind of like, could you just, but on the other hand, people like me who are threes or eights who are going to likely to go off and just get something done, sixes can be very valuable because they can save me from going over the cliff.
Yeah.
Oh, here's the thing you haven't thought of. Might you want to think about that?
Yeah. Well, this whole time we're talking about sixes, I'm playing with the idea of trustworthiness,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm feeling I might even cry talking about it. I think there's a loved one in my family, my extended family, that's a six, and I think years ago, between my husband and I, we proved that we were not trustworthy through a complete innocent accident,
Yeah.
and I don't think that relationship has ever recovered. And I'm
Mm.
curious how you earn trust with the six. Like, how many times do you have to prove yourself before it's earned? And I know that's going to be different per person and per type.
Well, the
Yeah.
six gets to decide that.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming it's trustworthiness a lot of times based on safety. If it's
Yeah, because
fear.
their core fear is that this is a threatening world
Yeah.
and anything can happen. And the worst is
Yeah.
likely going to happen, because they're I don't at their lowest end, I would say they're awfulizers. They're always the worst thing's going to always happen. They're always playing the worst case scenario. So that mindset is there, um, and their vice is doubt. So overcoming doubt is a huge thing.
Yeah.
So I would say to earn trust from a six, to demonstrate love to a six, is to reassure them about their own safety and your commitment to their own safety and to their own well-being.
Hmm.
Basically, just say what you're going to do
Yeah.
and then do it. And if you need to explain why, you tell them why. You get a sense that they need an explanation, or you feel like you need to talk about, I'm doing this because, and then you do it. Uh,
Yeah. I could see that. I mean, because humans are human. We do the
Yeah,
human things, and so I could imagine that if I was a six, it would be very easy to, I've tested you, I've tested you, I've tested you that third or fourth time. You passed the test the first 2 or 3 times, but then you broke the test, and that was enough for me to decide we're done.
right.
So I'm like, well, that's problematic because at some point there's got to be grace for the humans are going to do what the humans do.
Right.
You could lose a lot of relationships if it only takes one time.
But one of the blind spots of six is that they project their fears and their motives onto other people.
Mm.
And sometimes they don't own their own stuff. you know what I mean? It makes it difficult. Like if they don't own their own concern and worry, it's like it's easier for me to put it out there over on you, you know?
Yeah. Okay. So,
But let's talk about on the other side, because we kind of said, oh, this is the low end of six.
yeah.
The high end of six is that loyalty, that courage, and the spiritual value of faith on the high side. Because what is, that old biblical definition of faith is, trust in the unseen, the unknown. Like, so that's absolute, the counterbalance of
doubt.
of doubt.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I can see that in sixes. I'd listened to one I don't know. No, I didn't even listen to it. My sixth friend told me that she had listened to a podcast episode with Suzanne Stabile, and a parent had written in talking about the way their child communicates, and their child just chitter chatter about every detail of the day, and the parent was finding it just monotonous and like, that's what we got to. And Suzanne Stabile said that she would guess that child was a six, and that's how sixes relate to one another. It's that they tell all the little details of the day. Like, it's if you're a two and your vulnerability and sharing an emotional connection is the way that you relate, that's not intuitive for me. You know what I mean? And so it totally was enlightening to my relationship with that bestie, that like, that's what she wants to talk about, is like what was in stock at the grocery store and how it made her think of this other whatever, and how it, like, that's not something that it would occur to me to talk about with a friend. That doesn't seem important. So I think it's interesting, and putting it in the context of how observant they are and what they're solving for, it makes a little bit more sense. Like the way that they would relate would be those thoughts and observations.
Right. And it's almost like they're processing out loud so that they can talk through their own selves in terms of what were the potential problems in the day. Because if I can think about what happened today, I can think about how I need to be prepared to protect myself or somebody else tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. It's fascinating to me the way that all the numbers relate to one another.
Yes.
Both in terms of, one-to-one relationships, in terms of group dynamics. As a person, as a two that's thinking repressed, all of these thinking numbers are so helpful to me. But until I understand them, I'm totally uncomfortable. And so starting to understand them has been eye-opening. Okay, I'm going to take us off track. So let me come back to. So let's go to the wings.
Okay.
Are we ready to go to wings?
Sure. Okay. Well, wings 5 and 7.
Mm-hmm. So we talked about 5, the quiet
we just
specialist.
talked about, which is the quiet specialist, and 7, the enthusiastic visionary.
I could see how 5 and 6 would kind of be peas in a pod.
Yeah.
The quiet specialist isn't necessarily solving for what's going to go wrong, but they're thinking and solving for something, very thinking oriented. And it seems like standoffish a little bit.
Right. So while 5s are internally processing, 6s are generally externally processing. It's like,
okay.
talking about that. So even though they may be observant, they're going to process like out there with people. It's
Okay.
so 5 then can help the 6 be more sort of internally focused and self-contained.
Mm.
And if they can get a hold of their sort of objective thinking of the 5, sort of the 5 that's going deep into stuff and really trying to understand, sometimes that can go away with a 6 to sort of address some of the what we might think of as unrealistic fears or unfounded fears, because like, oh no, that's probably really not going to happen. This is an extreme. Let's say a 6 gets on a plane and their fear is, oh my gosh, what if the plane crashes? But
Right.
a 5 would say, you know, one in X number of thousands of planes crash. It's, safer for me to be on this plane than it was to be in the car on the freeway in Houston, Texas. So that, you see where I'm going with that. It's like that rational thought can help overcome some of the irrational fears that 6s have.
Yeah.
Um,
Now I love a 7. My older brother's a 7, and it took me more than 3 decades to figure out he wasn't perfect. So I don't know if I don't know if everybody loves 7s the way I love 7s, or if I'm just biased because of my older brother. So I'm curious about the 6 leaning towards a 7.
well, the 7, they, enthusiastic visionaries, so they are optimists by nature, as opposed to 6s who can be pessimistic by nature. So that sort of glass half empty, half full perspective can lean them in that direction with the 7. Um,
Also, they can access being a little more playful and lighthearted, not
Yeah.
so serious. They can just lighten up and enjoy life. And also could open up to having the ability to have more than one perspective of something, rather than things are going to all be bad or go wrong. Well, no, they don't. And I can look at it from a different viewpoint, because the 7s are always on the move, and they're viewing things quickly and changing their minds about things and reframing. So that can help a 6 lighten up.
Yeah, less anxious, less
Also, they
doubting.
can.
The thing about 7s, anxious, anxiety, and doubt, not real part of the 7 sculpt at all.
Right.
And 7s trust, while they're out there being visionary and having fun and moving about the world, they're trusting things are going to go well. And the 6 can pick up on that. The things, most of the time in this country, things go well, or to some degree of well.
And that makes sense, because if you're a 6, the more you lean into 7 and experience that things do work out, the more you could cultivate faith, the high side of 6.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful. Okay. And I know that the 3, 6, and 9, they're in their little triad of stretch and release.
Yes.
But I don't know which one is which for a 6.
So for a 6, the release is the 9, which is the flow state, the trust state, the soften state, where they join together. 6s and 9s is that they both value teamwork. They both value contributing to a team. So that's a place for them to where 6 can sort of feel like they can connect to that 9. But those 9s, those adaptive peacemakers, we'll let Data Boy tell you.
Well, the 9 can help the 6 just go with the flow. I can get in here and I can relax and go with the flow and let things be. I don't necessarily have to be the strong one all the time. I can relax and realize there's other people here. I don't have to walk in and really be, I got to be looking after everybody. No, I can be a 9. Everybody's okay. I know these people. We've done these things before. Things are going to work out. So a 9 can basically have a 6 just kind of calm down and relax, uh, and be patient and see the goodness in people and situations, as opposed to being afraid of what might go wrong.
also, nines can sort of help sixes, in that go with the flow, have unstructured time, have some things that don't have to always be planned to the nth degree. I mean, just like let things evolve in the way. And they don't have to, helps them to begin to work on feeling like they don't have to sort of arm up to go into a situation. It can just show up in the situation. Does that make sense? So, because sixes often feel like they have to arm up. They got to get their shield of courage and their sword of virtue to go into a situation. Whereas a nine will just show up. So that's one way for a six to go into release.
Yeah. I'm trying to formulate the question that I have in my mind without jumping too far ahead and diving too deep into the 9. But we know the 6 is that, like, their default emotion might be fear of some sort. Their balanced high side emotion, fear, doubt, and their high side would be faith. And when they go to 7, they can move into trust and moving forward. So what's the emotional move when they move towards 9?
Oh, golly. I would say calm down and realize that it's not on all their shoulders, that people have the capacity to take care of themselves. They don't have to carry the weight of everyone's safety and the outcome. Uh, Also, nines, many of us like to be involved in things that are fun. And sometimes you'll find the 9 being involved in something you don't expect them to be involved in. You don't look like a guy that would be taking ballet lessons or something. I mean, they can guide a 6 into just getting out of their zone of comfort and finding something else that could be fun for them to do.
Yeah. It's fascinating to me that there's a whole bunch of people whose zone of comfort is fear and looking for the worst to come. Like, that's just so different from my experience, but I do see that there's a lot of value in that, especially in an organization. And yeah. Okay, so if their release is the 9, then their stretch must be the 3.
It is.
Which intuitively makes some sense to me, but break that down.
Well, of course, I mean, it's called, focus, ownership, action. It's hard for a 6 sometimes to take action because they're constantly weighing what else is going to happen. If I do this, what's going to happen? If I do that, what's going to happen? So sometimes they get into that stuck spot and don't take action because they're concerned. So their doubts can sort of take over for them. Whereas 3s, we might have a doubt, but we're going to move on it pretty fast because just that doesn't serve. It gets in the way. Sometimes we just keep moving. So, but again, the stretch is, how do I move out of that 6? What's going to stretch them into another way of being? Well, being decisive, taking ownership, because they tend to not necessarily take ownership because they've got that loyalty thing going on, and they're typically loyal to some other level of authority, not necessarily seeing themselves as the role of in the authority position.
All things that 3s will do. 3s like to get credit for their contributions, and 6s, they feel like it's something they should do out of the kindness of their heart, or don't necessarily want to feel uncomfortable being recognized for it. They can help them realize that they are valuable and they are special, and they can be give and receive, and get credit for what they do.
So one of the opportunities for a 6, thinking about stretching into 3, that old thing about fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
So, like, having the confidence, having the overcoming their doubts or their fears, whereas a 3, that's not they're going to be confident first, and then they might consider, oh, what should I be thinking about here? The
Oh, you
opportunity,
threes.
huh?
I said, oh, you threes.
I know. So the opportunity is to pretend you're confident when you're not, and pretend to be afraid when, in fact, you might be anxious. Pretend you're unafraid when they might be anxious. But then over time, that confidence and that confidence will come through, and some of those fears will be put aside because you really have already done it.
Yeah.
So fake it till you make
it. I love that. And the gosh, I kind of want to go back to like the vice and the virtue of like, what's the emotional word that's the high side of 3? You remember?
The emotional word that's the high side of 3.
Yeah, like for 2s, the low side is pride and the high side is humility. With 6, we did.
Would it be
Deceit? Are you thinking of the
Oh,
word
that's
deceit?
right.
The low side of 3.
This is the low side of, yeah. So what was the high side of? Oh, authenticity, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Oh, I like that. If that's sort of the stretch. I mean, I know that the stretch, the release, and the wings, it's not just talking to emotions, but since that's what I'm obsessed about, that's what I'm curious about. With 7, we so clearly identified that you move towards trust that could help you move into faith. So I think that's interesting that the stretch is 3 in its authenticity, because if your default is loyalty, that honestly, it kind of puts the perspective on other rather than self, and on community. And so if your authenticity, that's more about self. So that makes sense to me that would be a stretch. And I could see how, for me personally, faith, if that's where I need to grow in my emotional experience, faith is not something I can experience if I'm not in having an authentic moment with myself. Like, it's not even accessible to me personally. And so I could see how stretching towards the 3 would benefit me in my, whether it's your emotional personal development towards faith, or whether it's your actual spiritual experience. I could see how that would be beneficial. So anyway, I just always have to bring it back to the emotions because I can't help it. But I was thinking, as we were talking about 6s and detailed and looking for trouble, one of my favorite 6s is a doctor, and is supposedly a very highly respected doctor. And I was thinking about, the credence of first do no harm, and how this doctor is like an internal medicine doctor, and the complexities of how do we combine these medicines, and what are the side effects, and how do we do all that and not create a worse problem. I'm like, oh, that's perfect for a 6.
Yeah.
So I'm sure doctors are all types of numbers, but I'm like, oh, it's a beautiful example.
Yeah.
Of how a 6, benefits us. So we talked about, that 6s they'll get along to go along in conflict. Or no, and not, did we say that in conflict or just in general?
I would probably say it's in general. I mean,
they'll comply.
They'll comply, but they're going to comply.
I think it's conditional. Get along to go along. They'll go in and they'll get along and go along, and they're watching and observing, and at some point in time when it's going to work out, they'll relax. So their intent is to get along and go along and be a good teammate.
But only if they feel like they have been heard about their concerns, because they're going to be constantly raising their I think of them 6s as having this super antenna for risk. For they're hyper vigilant, and if people don't pay attention to them, and hear their concerns, they're not going to go along. That's when they're going to get to that resistance stage I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
So.
And that can overwhelm a team because there's so many things they're concerned about. I was sitting in on a coaching session and learning someone coaches six. And the six was describing a situation at work where he was part of a team and having a hard time getting along and going along. And what the coach picked up is says, "Well, you got a machine gun of fears and concerns, and you're shooting them like you got an AR-15 or a shotgun." He says, "Go in there with one bullet at a time. Let them process one bullet, and then they will see your value. Pick your bullet." And maybe this is kind of harsh to say that, but this is how the coaching went. And it was good advice to this young man. Once he somehow or another dialed back the volume or the number of concerns, he was able to get along with the team better, and they appreciated it.
Yeah.
They just couldn't keep up with all that he was laying on the table. It's just too much. And a lot of what he had to concede that a lot of what he was concerned about wasn't going to happen, or very unlikely to happen. But he was still concerned about it, and it was relevant. I mean, he's a part of a team, and they need to know. So,
I mean, I think obviously the violence of that example is kind of harsh, but I also think it's not inappropriate. Depending on your number, that is how you receive. If there's just this deluge of, but what about this? What about that? What about this? And this is going to happen, you can feel attacked by it, even though it has nothing to do with you personally, you know?
Yeah, like I just can't solve it all at once, you one at a time. Yeah.
And then if you're, some numbers are going to take things personally. And so to throw that at them, if all you're throwing is the concerns, and you're not talking about, well, what's going right, that's hard.
Right.
So, yeah.
And or if you're the type 3 and all you hear is the 6, throwing out the concerns, it's like, well, just tell me what's your solution? What's your proposed solution?
Yeah.
Give me something here. What are you going to do about it? Don't just bring me that, concern.
And I think if I was a 7, I might just blow them off. So like, whatever, dude. I'm moving on to the next thing.
Yeah. So but there are the counter type 6 is an interesting. So I'm going to explain like there's a flight or fight thought in the brain, and the two main types of 6, they are kind of in the flight. They're looking to figure out what's going to go wrong and do things to protect us. So the counter type is the opposite of that. They will go to the danger. They're going to be big and large, and take that on. And I haven't met one like that yet. I can't identify a person I know who's like that, but they are out there. They're not going to run away. They're going to run toward it. They're going to be aware of it. They're going to sense it. They're going to feel it, and they're going to tackle it.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking of I've identified quite a few 6s in my life in the last few years since I learned about the Enneagram, and I agree. All the ones I know are the flight personality.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's fascinating. So let's get to, I keep going back to relationships, but what is it that 6s need from their relationships? Like we talked, with 5, we said give them time, and with 6, I guess they need to process out loud.
Well, yeah, they definitely gonna.
I guess a question I have in that is like, is it even, how helpful is it to even try to assure them that they're already safe? Like,
Well, you can't just tell them that. That's not going to work for them. That's going to
Okay.
be, yeah.
So I think you hear them out, and then you have a conversation about probabilities, and then you have the conversation that you're in there with them and you can help them and you're going along, but you just can't fix everything all at once. Have some type of priority, and then love them by guiding them to their lines and their wings and taking them to that place uh, without calling it what it is. Get them in a space where they do something where they can have fun and enjoy it. You know, if someone likes to ride bicycling, well, get him involved in cycling. Uh, if there's things that to distract them from, they're going to take it with them a little bit, but if they feel safe at it and they enjoy it, it'll take their mind off of it. Just help them break the pattern of it, how to step out of it.
Mom, you have anything to add about what a 6 would need from relationship?
I think it's that that's just being that supportive part, and in some ways, even though it's their sort of moniker, loyal skeptic, they're also looking for people to be loyal to them. So demonstrating loyalty is big for a 6. I think hearing sometimes, because some of us want to redirect people away from their fears and concerns, but sometimes we have to be willing to hear them and acknowledge them and not just go, are you crazy? Are you not? That's not going to happen. But not necessarily validating that the fear is real, but validating their perspective to have the fear, and then as Dad says, bringing them to their wings or their lines to support them to move through that. Let me try to think what else about 6. I just want to, because I wanted to go back. It's the SX type. It is the fight type.
Oh, okay.
The subtype is the SX type.
The self-preservation? Or no, sorry. SX is the 1-to-1?
The 1-to-1s.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, huh.
So their byword is intimidation. They're intimidators. They're going to be big over the fear, whereas SP type is warmth, SO type is duty.
I'm like categorizing all my friends and family now. I'm like, oh, yep, there they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, you said it was SO is warmth?
SP is warmth.
SP is warmth.
They're going to be warm and friendly. SO, think about it. Culture, society, group, duty. They have a duty to protect.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know the subtype, but I think if I was projecting, I would probably say Joe Biden is an SO6.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I said this at the beginning of the episode that one of my best friends, longest friends, is a 6, and it surprised me because when I read about the 6, I didn't necessarily understand the archetype until I connected it to her, and then it was, oh, and for her, the way that she shows love is, it's acts of service and it's very much loyalty, and if I got to call her in the middle of the night and tell her I need help, she's going to pick up the phone and she's going to drive to where I'm at. She's going to help me,
Right.
And that's that kind of, I guess, combination of protection and loyalty. I'm curious, what are the other ways that 6s would show love? I would put her in the warmth category.
Well, if you think about people that are duty, that are like concerned for doing the right thing, for doing their duty to whoever is the group. So whether it's um, acts of service, as you're talking about, how am I going to, what's my job here? What do I need to do here? How do I need to put things in place to protect people? They offer the gift of this out of the manual, but they offer the gift of devotion.
Yeah.
Think about that.
That's a
People that are
beautiful.
six, devotion. Isn't that a sweet way to think about a person?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's beautiful imagery, and yeah, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
The thing that comes to mind for me with sixes, which it's true for all numbers or types, but I had this like kind of flashpoint or download of a bunch of different examples of perspective. So when I was taking driver's ed many moons ago, they said every 3 seconds you want to check your rear view mirror. You're driving, check rear view, check your rear view. And then I was thinking about eye health and how eye doctors have said if you're sitting in a screen all day, every 20 minutes you got to get up for 10 and you got to change your focus. And ideally every 20 seconds you're looking away for a little bit and then you come back. And so I was thinking about that, how healthy that shift in perspective is for us as humans.
Right.
And it just seems the idea of the six and being so fear-based and looking for what's wrong, I just had this like sense of empathy of like, could you just give yourself a little break? Just look in the rear view for every 3 seconds, just take a little break and come back,
Right.
I don't know. I feel such a sense of empathy for the idea that it would be easy to get stuck in that spiral. What's going to go wrong? What's going to go wrong? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So one of
Any,
the things for a six,
yeah.
In the realm of other skill sets is to do a gratitude journal, because it helps them focus on positive emotions, the
What's going right?
what things worked, the things. So that's sort of a count and a way for sixes to grow, support themselves. Not that it's not good for everybody, but because they tend to not dwell on their positive emotions, they tend to like, oh yeah, well that was just that one time, but tomorrow it's going to be worse. That was just
Right.
one time. So having that habit can help them begin to see a different pattern.
Yeah. Yeah, that's lovely. That makes so much sense. Any other like tips or guidance for sixes before we wrap up, or anything else you want to add?
I don't know that I have anything.
Okay.
I mean, in some ways, when you hear the words devotion, courage, prepared, trustworthy, sounds like a Boy Scout, doesn't
I was gonna,
it?
I was gonna say the same thing. That sounds like a Boy Scout.
Yeah, those are the good Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
They're all those things. They're take a stand for the greater good. They show courage. They live up to their commitments. They're devoted to the people they care about. It's all pretty great stuff.
Yeah, it is. It is.
I think we have to have compassion for the sixes, for that internal strife that they have.
Yeah, that's a lot of
It
pressure to
is.
carry around.
Yeah.
To feel that and not experience people taking it seriously or doing what they think should be done to mitigate the risk.
Yeah. I mean, and I was feeling earlier in the episode, I was talking about my family, extended family member, and how I sort of feel like I don't get a shot to repair that relationship. Like they've just decided we're not trustworthy and that's all I got, you know? And so at first I was sitting in just in the hurt of that. And then I was shifted to, oh my gosh, but look what all is on their plate and look what all they're worried about. And of course that they're not going to, you know, make time for us. But, you know, it's just, it puts a different perspective on it.
Right.
So,
Because whatever they got on their plate, think about this, you know, whatever. I'm just saying, whatever this incident is,
yeah.
a thing, a relationship, an illness, or whatever. Another number might be worried about 2 or 3 things about that thing.
Right.
But a 6, they got 6, 7, 8 things they're worried about that thing.
Yeah.
And then you multiply it times that, like they're just carrying a much bigger load, you know, from that perspective than most others.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean that, you know, other people don't have concerns, just that if we think about having compassion and love for the 6, we can think about them where they're at.
Yeah. Understanding that weight that they carry. And such a beautiful desire to protect, whether that's community or individual loved ones, you know, that's a beautiful, you know, it was just, when we're recording this, it was just recently Father's Day. And so our senior minister, Michael Gott, was talking about the, you know, kind of the divine masculine to protect and provide. And so what a beautiful example that the 6s are leaning into that. It is a divine desire and skill to protect. And it's sad that what that requires is to consider what might go wrong. So yeah. Anything else before we wrap up?
I don't think so.
All right.
I think we're good.
Well, 6s, try to lean into your 7 a little bit today, or your 3. If you need some help with 3, email Stephanie Foy. And I'm also curious, you know, if you're a 6 and you feel like we missed something important, or like you want to add something, I would love to hear from you. You're one of the numbers I don't intuitively connect with the easiest. So thanks for being here, and we honor your desire to protect and to be devoted, and we wish you success and luck on your path to faith and trusting, and we'll see you next week, loves. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Living Out Love podcast. If this episode was helpful for you, there are 3 ways that you can share the love. You can send this episode to a family, friend, neighbor, leave me a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform, or comment and ask questions on YouTube. This season is meant to be interactive. Thanks again for your presence. I appreciate you being here. Talk to you next week, loves.